Hi everyone, I'm Tom Slivick, and today I'm with Congressman Tom McClintock. How are you doing, Tom?
I'm doing great, Tom.
It's good to see you one more time.
Thanks for having me back.
And, we're going to be talking to you probably about the economy. I think the economy's on everybody's mind.
Oh, that's what people want to talk about everywhere I go. People are getting desperate, and they realize that we cannot continue down the road we've been on.
Okay, and here in California, you would think it's even a bigger issue, since our unemployment rate, I believe, is still about 10.1.
Well, yeah, California compounds bad national policy with bad state policy, and until that changes, wherever the country is, California is going to be dragged along on the bottom. And the frustrating thing about that is, you remember, Tom, 20 years ago, California always ran well ahead of the nation's economy. We had what we considered a recession-proof economy. But we've added enough taxes, enough regulations, enough governmental burdens that we have managed to destroy opportunity even in this once golden state of California. Right. The good news is we can get it back. It's all public policy.
Yes, it would seem to me that that's probably the issues or the issues that matter are really policy issues, and that's where we've in the government has probably taken a wrong turn. At least that's my views. And where'd you like to start? So I guess we could say, it's the economy. What would you like to say about the economy?
Well, the first thing we've got to understand is that our country and our state have not been struck down by some mysterious act of God. These are all acts of government, and they're all within our power to change the moment we summon the political will to do so. We get that opportunity every 2 years. The next opportunity is right ahead of us. When I'm told, well, this is the worst recession since the Depression, I hear that a lot. And my response is, well, I don't know about that. I remember a time much more recently when we had double-digit unemployment, double-digit inflation on top of that. We had mile-long lines around gas stations. Interest rates were at 21.5%. Right. Maybe we don't remember those days as vividly because they didn't last very long.
I think maybe people don't, and it is kind of too bad because it was very bad.
And what happened? That was the end of the Carter administration. We elected Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan diagnosed the problem very, very differently than this administration. Remember what Reagan said in his inauguration in this great economic crisis? Government is not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem. He cut back the tax and regulatory burdens that were crushing the economy, and the result was one of the most prolonged periods of economic expansion in American history. And it's not a uniquely Reagan Republican policy. John F. Kennedy did the same thing in the early 1960s with the same result.
Basically,
but it's very different what we're doing today.
Okay. Basically, I think what those two great leaders had in common was they knew the economy is a dynamic thing. It's a dynamic thing.
Exactly.
It's not just some hard numbers that you add on one side and subtract from the other.
And it responds very quickly to policy changes.
It moves, much like locally. A lot of people talk, like locally, if a business gets local business, if you spend $1 there, that dollar generally goes around about 7 times. So it's in 7 people's pocket. Mm-hmm. Now, each person's got that. They're paying taxes on it. And so when that money's moving around, we generate a lot more taxes. And it doesn't seem to be something that the Democrat Party on the whole gets.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, the policies of this administration are predicated on the assumption that if government spends enough, it'll be able to jumpstart the economy. And half of their equation is what you've just described. If I take $1 from Peter and give it to Paul, Paul's got an extra $1 to spend. He takes that into a local shop. The shopkeeper orders more inventory. The manufacturer orders more resources. That dollar ripples through the economy. That part is sound. But they completely forget the other half of the equation. Peter now has $1 less to spend in that very same economy, $1 less to ripple through, which is why income transfers always net to zero economic growth. That's why these policies haven't worked, is because they can't work. Government cannot eject $1 into the economy that it hasn't first taken out of the same economy. That is the fallacy of these policies. They have run us trillions of dollars deeper in debt. and the unemployment rate's the same as when we started.
Also, the dollar isn't used in the same way, because I might want to use my dollar to buy this.
Exactly.
Someone else wants to use their dollar to buy that.
Exactly.
And so, businesses that are saying catering to my needs or other people's needs and things that they want are, can grow.
Right.
And hire more people. So when the free enterprise system, is working, it works well.
Well, this is the other half of the analysis of what is wrong with the current policies. We're taking huge amounts of capital and transferring them from the productive sector, where investment decisions are based upon what's the highest and best use of this dollar, and we're transferring those decisions to the government sector, where the investment's being made on the basis of, well, what's the highest and best political return on this dollar? And those two things are very, very different. We have literally squandered the wealth of the nation at a time when we could least afford to squander that wealth. And so, as I said, we're trillions of dollars deeper in debt and no better off than we were when we started.
So that's what it seems like, that the government, when it spends money, picks where it wants to spend it.
It picks winners and losers in a marketplace. So instead of consumers picking those winners and losers based upon their own individual judgment of what is best for, how to vote with that dollar, those decisions are being transferred to politicians who are using a very, very different criteria, and we shouldn't be surprised if their decisions aren't producing the kind of prosperity that we once had when we were making these decisions for ourselves.
Okay, so you have a point here too, that basically regulations are what causes this, or this is how it goes about being put in place by government regulation.
Well, you've got avalanches of new regulations, thousands of pages of new regulations on businesses spawned by Obamacare alone. Add in Dodd-Frank and add in the EPA and all of these new mandates on manufacturers. Add in all of the decisions of the NLRB that are crushing companies like Boeing. You begin to realize this is doing enormous damage to the economy. The House of Representatives actually passed what's called the REINS Act. It says that any government regulation that costs more than $100 million has to be passed by the Congress so that there's some elected official who's being held accountable. That, of course, was killed in the Senate, but it's an important reform.
And that is an important point, because now more and more laws seem to be passed vaguely, and then, on very broad language, and then they go to bureaucrats.
Exactly.
And the bureaucrats write the rules.
Exactly, and that is entirely contrary to the entire design of the American Constitution, which is to divide up the various powers of government. Congress has the sole authority to legislate under our Constitution, and yet Congress has been ceding that authority to the executive branch. So when these regulatory agencies end up writing laws, and they are writing a lot of laws these days, you end up taking that separation of powers that keeps government limited and us free, and instead you combine them all into one entity again, which was exactly what the founders found was so wrong with Europe, that the same individual who was making decisions was also executing them and judging them. What happens when a regulatory bureaucracy writes a regulation? They're legislating. They then enforce that same regulation. So the same entity that writes it also is enforcing it. And then if you want to appeal, you have to go to an administrative law judge. They've combined all three branches of government into one, and that is antithetical to the design of the Constitution and antithetical to our American principles of liberty.
It seems, when we talk about it on a practical level, how is it that we would write, laws and have Congress and the Senate write them so that they were writing the rules? Would we have to, take on each rule independently, if you follow me, so we could get input?
If it reached a cost of $100 million, Congress would have to vote on it so that there would be somebody that you can hold accountable for the decision that's destroyed your business or your job.
But that wouldn't be folded into an omnibus bill? It couldn't be tacked on to another bill?
It would have to be individually adopted by the Congress so that you have somebody you can hold accountable.
To me, that sounds like a good thing. Because it is hard. Maybe you could tell some of the people why it's hard, because bureaucrats and people that have positions or just jobs with the government. You just can't go willy-nilly or something and say, okay, you're fired, we're going to have a new, you don't work here anymore. Right? How does it work? I mean, how can you get control back?
Well, again,
with
the Constitution's being ignored. We need to start enforcing that Constitution. Article 1 says that Congress will legislate. We need to take that power back. Congress has ceded that authority to the executive branch where it was never intended. And the practical impact that's having on the economy can't be overstated.
Right.
Ask a banker why they're not lending. They'll tell you. The amount of they don't know what the rules are going to be from one day to the next. The avalanche of regulations that they're taking in leaves them in a situation where they don't know from one day to the next what kind of environment they're going to be loaning money into. So they just sit on it because of the uncertainties that an out-of-control regulatory bureaucracy has established.
And of course, I think you're very right there. Even if even with the regulation, you're not quite sure what the regulation means.
Yep.
Sometimes they're so complicated. I don't know if anybody can know
and now
what
they
mean.
become conflicting as well. So one agency will tell you to do one thing that another agency forbids. We're seeing that particularly in the mountain regions. I mean, Lake Tahoe is just under tremendous threat of that. In fact, one guy that needed to make $8,000 in pier repairs ended up facing $20,000 in fees.
Tom, we've got 10 seconds. We're going to be going to a break. I'm with Congressman Tom McClintock, and we'll be back with more on TSPN right after this. You're watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN.